everybody. Please bear with me. This afternoon we have a severe thunderstorm where I'm at and a tornado warning. So I'm hoping that this goes perfectly fine and that nothing happens. But if it does, I will have to pause and get back to it. So the point of this workshop is really a reflection, since I have now gotten through my PhD, of things you can do in undergrad to strengthen a graduate school application. For those of you that are still in high school, this is a really informative video that will help you out in the long run, but I wouldn't even worry about strengthening a graduate school application probably until you're like in your junior or senior year, and it's more a good way to kind of plan moving forward. So probably the first and most anticipated one is going to be your coursework. So regardless of if you're going to go to graduate school for law, for a PhD, or for medical school, although I am going to skew towards PhD on this one, you're going to want to choose a major and possibly a minor that's going to support your goals. Ooh. Going to write these out as notes. I also got out my tablet, so maybe I'll do some handwriting, but it's been a while since I have used this tablet, and so that might be a little bit chunky. When you think about going for an MD, your coursework is probably the most complex that you need to add in. I don't think you necessarily need a degree when you're going for an MD that is biology. I think you can definitely diversify by doing something like engineering, which is an applied sciences and a harder and broader emphasis on mathematics and physics. You can choose something like English or writing or philosophy that'll teach you logic. But the most important part when you're in an MD is you need a degree, plus you need to get your pre-med requisites. And I think the easiest way to figure out what these requisites are, and the way that I completed these pre-med requisites when I was an undergraduate, is to look up a bunch of universities that you're interested in and look at what they're required to get into their med schools. There's a whole bunch of courses that are pretty standard, such as Introduction to Bio, Evolutionary Bio. Sometimes, however, they add on extra things. Some schools require anatomy, some schools require microbiology. Back when I was starting to apply for med school and realized that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, I would not plan to apply for any of the schools that required microbio or anatomy because I didn't take those. But you need to make sure that you know your pre-med requisites. You need to be able to fit those into your degree program. I recommend for degree programs, especially if you're early on, is constantly making a 4-year plan, especially if you're in pre-med. It takes quite a lot of planning to make sure you can fit all these in. When I was a chemical engineer, it actually worked really well to be a pre-med because I was able to take a lot of those chemistry and biology courses as my natural science and chemistry elective, since chemical engineers take a lot of chemistry. And so you might want to find something that swings that way. Additionally, something that I regret not doing is that I wish I had gotten a minor in something that I was just really interested in. I think no matter what you get your minor in, if you get it in a language, if you get it in an art, just the prospect of being in college and learning something that's outside of a typical discipline causes you to think about things and meet people and have a life experience that is different and more holistic. And I think that makes your applications more interesting. Your PhD, I would say your pre-med requisites actually, when you're applying for MD, I would say your pre-med requisites are probably the most important thing you're going to do. You need to get a good degree, but these need to look really good, and you need to complete them, and you need to fit them in. In a PhD, really all that you're going to do are your degree requirements, and your degree requirements are what are super important because you're very likely to get a PhD in the same or something very similar to your undergraduate degree. It's hard even to switch from chemistry to a chemical engineering PhD. There's a little bit more movement in the engineering, but even then, like chemi versus bio-e versus mechanical engineering, we have different requisites. So you're going to really want to focus on doing these well. and doing the best that you can in them. And then I also do recommend, just because it's the one thing I regret, I never got a minor. I really was just doing a lot of pre-med requisites, but I think it would have been really cool and really fun and helpful for my current future to do something like an English minor or a literature minor. Or I really, really love design, and I wish I had planned ahead and done like an industrial design co-program just to enjoy undergraduate more. Law school is a completely different game where I think the most important thing is passing your LSATs, but I can't speak to that so much as I haven't gotten through that. But there are really wonderful videos on YouTube that can talk about that. So that's probably the number one that you think about when you're getting into graduate school, is getting your coursework and then getting the highest GPA that you can. I would caution you to not put too much pressure on the GPA that you cannot enjoy your coursework. I think it is more important to get an above average GPA. It doesn't need to be a 4.0, but definitely don't be in the 2.0s. I would aim for above the threes overall. But I would say it's more important to be able to get a good GPA and to have a holistic understanding of why you picked those classes, why maybe you chose a minor, how you can talk about your career goals and your applications and why those matter, than to have only gotten a 4.0. For those of you that aren't in engineering, um, yet, or those of you that are early in engineering, it is a very hard degree program, and it's an exponential curve for how much you're going to study versus what is that payoff. So, what do I mean by that is you can study a pretty decent amount to get a C, and then it's not the same amount more to get a B. It's like you have to study even more to get a B, and you have to study even more than that to get an A, and it can be really all consuming. So, I really recommend practicing boundaries. I really recommend finding a course that it's maybe easier to get a good grade, but not necessarily easier to do the course, if that makes sense, and to really balance things out. I wasn't so good at that in undergrad um, or my PhD, if I'm being honest. I think the second most important one for PhDs, but it's also increasingly important in MDs, is participation in research. Just taking part. Ooh, just taking part in this textile program is a great step for that. We're teaching you how to read papers, we're teaching about professional development, you can add methodologies onto your resume, you can talk about research a little bit more, and hopefully you will be interested in applying to research labs, we hope, in neurodevelopmental brain research. After this program. But what I think is really important is getting involved specifically as an undergraduate researcher, and in preferably one lab for an extended amount of time. So, what you really want is to be in one lab for 1 to 4+ years if you can. I was only in my lab, I think, for 2 years, and I got into a PhD. But it really takes time of being in that lab working on a specific project to really learn how research works, particularly wet lab research, and to really learn these extra aspects about reading papers, understanding a field, understanding what goes into planning experiments, not just doing methodologies and making hypotheses, and then more importantly, to be able to speak about that in a way that is mature, in a way that is informed, and in a way that can show that you see a future. I don't think it is super important in undergrad to do research in the field you want your career to be in. I did completely different research in my PhD than my undergraduate research. In undergrad, I did small intestine research, and in my PhD, I obviously did this neurodevelopmental data science research. And then now in my postdoc, I have switched from engineering lab to a clinical lab. It's still neurodevelopmental, but the approach is very wet lab, very clinical, very translational. It's very, very different. So in undergrad, the most important thing I think is that you find a good mentor, and that you find a healthy place that you can spend these decent amount of years there. So what do I mean by a good mentor? Preferably a PI, a principal investigator, that's also invested in who you are as your career, and you get the opportunity to meet with every once in a while. But more realistically, the PhD student or the postdoc that you're working under is invested in you as a researcher. So they take the time to get to know you, they help you find opportunities for you, they teach you about research fundamentals, not just, hey, do this thing for me, not just, hey, wash the dishes, but hey, here's an experiment, here's a paper I'm working on, can you help me towards that? Um, and that you feel supported, and that you feel that your identity in science is reinforced positively. So I do think participation in research and coursework are the two most important ones. I genuinely think everything that you get after that is just a little bit of icing on the cake, but I really didn't have most of these future things. Oh, just kidding. I lied. There's one more category that is important. So your letters of recommendation. So for medical school, graduate school, both master's degrees and PhDs, you're going to need letters of recommendation. And you typically need 3 letters, and you might have the opportunity to have more. So let's talk a little bit about your letters of recommendation. You want to start working as early as you can to just get to know people. Attend office hours. Attend office hours. Get involved in student organizations. So any type of club is going to have a faculty advisor. A club with an involved faculty advisor who's actually there and participates is, I think, going to be better for you as a letter of recommendation. Attend seminars, take electives. These are all great ways to get to know professors. Letters of recommendation, it is going to say they don't all need to be your professor. I will admit I got into my PhD with 2 professors and then somebody that I worked for. She was also in the university system, but she wasn't a doctor. I think that not having 3 professors really hindered my chances of getting into a bunch more graduate schools. I got in, I'm dead well, it's fine, but I think that I should have had 3 professors. And that's really where I stumbled. Also, your professors want to write you letters of rec, but it's easier if they do know you. So, who do I recommend for these 3 letters of rec now that I've gone through this process and talked to a lot of people? So, for your first letter, you typically are going to want someone who knows that you do academically well. So, you're going to want to pick the class that you did well in. If it's for an MD, you might want to do something that's in your pre-med requisites. So that's going to be biology, biochem, organic chemistry, anatomy, any of those. And for your PhD, you're really going to want to have this professor be in your field of undergrad that you are applying for your PhD. So for me, I would really want this to be a chemie professor. You want to have done academically well in their course. You want to have attended their office hours and in some way keep in touch with them. If you really liked a professor, this is a thing I've learned, send them a quarterly email just being like, hey, this is an update. When you're still at school, stop by their office hours even later and be like, oh, I liked what you were doing here. You recommended this book and I read it. Just keep up that discourse so that when it's time to ask for a letter, they're there. Your second letter is likely going to be your research letter. So this is going to be your research PI. So the thing to keep in mind, you can't have your research PI also be your academic letter. For both MDs and PhDs, this is going to be a research letter. For a JD, you could do like a different type of research. It could be a group project type letter. A type of thing, or like if you did any policy work or anything like that, that's going to be your equivalent. Policy, group project, or like literature research, or research even if you're especially going into patent law, then that standard research. So this is when your research PI could have been your professor and you could have done well in their class, but their letter is really going to focus on how you can tackle a research type problem. So this is why getting involved in research is very important. It's good to see this letter. Then the third letter for PhDs, JDs, and MDs, you're likely going to want someone that knows you for your leadership. So this is either going to be like a professor who wasn't saw you lead a group project. So if you're taking a capstone or something like that, if you're very involved, again, going to office hours, if you show that you can be a leader and you can work in a team and you collaborate, that's really going to be what you want the thing to focus on. I think this is a great opportunity, they're not always registered, but to be involved in a student organization or involved in like a charity or a volunteer work, but you really want to show and have your letter writers show that you work in a team, that you're a leader, that you're a go-getter, that you balance these things on top of your academics. Sometimes, especially in med school, you'll be given a fourth letter. So your MD, your med school letter, and I'm not going to get a ton into medical school applications here, is going to want to be someone that you shadow with. So you're going to want them to be an MD that's going to be writing your letter. You've either shadowed with them, you've done clerical hours, you've done volunteer hours, you've done, what are they called, scribe hours, any of that. If you have a fourth letter for your PhD, really it can be whatever. It can be someone who knows you well for work, it can be another researcher, it can be another professor, it can be leadership, it can be outreach. A fourth letter I haven't seen is that common. Those are the first three that I find the most important. Okay, so I'll take back what I said before. Those are the three components that you have to have for your application. All of the components after this are things that are going to make you seem just a little bit stronger. So I'm going to talk next. Research scholarships and opportunities will make you look a little bit better. So I've talked about this in I think I talked about it in the getting involved in undergraduate research. So I think a really good one is a college-wide research scholarship for University of Washington. This is called the Mary Gates Scholarship. It's very competitive, but working on the application and writing it is a fantastic way to improve at research. Also, you shouldn't write it alone. You should write it alone. You should write it by yourself, but then you should send it to your PhD mentor, and then you should send it to your PI to get edits, and then you should edit it a few times. That being said, editing it a few times means you want to get it to them at least a month to your editors before it's due. You're likely going to have way more edits than you ever anticipated, even if you're like the top student in all of your research classes, and you're likely to have more rounds of edits than you expected that you're gonna have to fit on top of classwork. I would aim for 2 months before, but that I never hit that either. So I'll be honest, a month before is good. But so research-wide color scholarship, something like Mary Gates Scholarship, something, what are they called? The WRF, the Washington Research Foundation Scholarship, even smaller scholarships such as the Student Technology Fee. Any of those out of the University of Washington are really great opportunities to show that you can write a research proposal and get your research funded. So other things, REUs, these are research experiences for undergraduates. Typically you need to apply really early, so you need to apply by the fall or winter of the year before the summer of your REU. And you can actually just look up entire lists of these REUs for your program of interest. The NSF has lists, the NIH has lists. Apply to as many of them as you can. You're going to need a letter of rec. You're going to need to write yourself a personal statement. So you're going to want to get that to your research advisor early. You're going to want to ask your letters of rec early, at least a month before they're due, and just apply to all of those that you can. This is a really great opportunity to get to learn how research in a different lab and at a different university works, to begin building up your repertoire of research and to begin exploring what the world has to offer. Those look really, really good. And then you could also do anything like a summer internship. You could work in industry, you could work for a nonprofit. For those of you that are doing MDs, you're going to need to scribe, you're going to need shadowing hours, and I highly recommend volunteering in a hospital as well. So that'll really take up those summer internships for you. So our MDs could do scribing, shadowing, volunteering, anything to be in a hospital environment and getting to know MDs. Um, cool. So then we have presentations. So it's a really good thing to get experience presenting at least once or twice during undergrad. You shouldn't expect to present all the time. So what do I mean by a presentation? So a lab meeting isn't a type of presentation you're going to put on your resume. Anything that is at the college level is going to be great. I think you should have one of these at least, and then maybe something at the national or academic society level, which might be international depending on your field. For chemical engineering and most engineering, it's a national level society because there's a lot of us. So, the college level, most universities will have an undergraduate research symposium. UW has Symposium. UW has the Mary Gates Symposium. You do not have to have won the Mary Gates Scholarship to give a talk or a poster. Both work for presentations at the Mary Gates Symposium. Oftentimes, they will accept most of the students that apply. You have to reach like a threshold of you had to put effort into your abstract. But it's a really great opportunity to learn how to make a poster and to learn how to present, and it's quite safe. At the national level, what I mean by safe is that it's a really good area for you to practice where no one's out to get you. No one's really trying to steal your research there, anything. You don't have to worry about making a bad name for anyone. It's just a great opportunity for you to learn. If you can, I also recommend getting one presentation in at the national level or at the academic society level. So for chemical engineering, this is called the American Institute for Chemical Engineers under annual meeting and student conference. So the hardest thing about this is one, you have to get your abstract accepted. AICHE does accept all abstracts, but they're due many months before the conference. So like the AICHE conference is always in the late fall, so it's either October or November, and your application is going to be due in the summer, if not earlier. So be prepared that your application is going to be due many months before this, and you're also going to need to find funding to attend. So students that are in biomedical engineering, chemical engineering, sometimes there are scholarships, but oftentimes the way you're going to get to these conferences is by being involved in your student chapter. Even if you're not in engineering, you probably have a student chapter. So for chemistry, that's ACS, the American Chemical Society. For biomedical engineering, that's BMES, the Biomedical Engineering Society. If you're involved in the student chapter often has funds to send its students to the conferences. These can get really expensive. I do not recommend paying out of pocket. You have to pay a conference registration fee that's often hundreds of dollars, flights, and hotels. So just keep that in mind. If you are going to go to the conference, I would recommend going during your junior or senior year, and then you're going to apply at that time, and then you should submit to give a poster or a talk at that point as well. Okay, and then I'm going to say leadership is next. So we talked a little bit about it up here in this concept of wanting a letter of rec, who's seen you as a leader, who has seen you as a group player. So you want to get involved in some type of student organization, nonprofit, volunteering, entrepreneurship, anything like that that's going to show how you grow. My recommendation is rather than doing a ton of them, choosing a couple of them and spending a lot of time on them. How I think you should really go about that is freshman year trying everything. Go to the intro meeting for everything, see what you vibe with, see what you don't like, see what seems like it has a good presence at your university. At some universities, like the Society of Women Engineers is a really great presence and has a lot of different engineers. At some universities, it's not as popular or it's only CS. Go to a bunch of these different clubs, find a group you like, find something you're interested in, and then I recommend dedicating real time to it. That's so you can actually write about it in your statements. That's so that you can actually discuss it. That way you can maybe win awards, or you can get a position in the student organization like a president, or anything to really show leadership. And then I will add fellowships. So getting a fellowship looks really nice. It basically means you come in with your own funding. For those of you that are US citizens, there's the NSF GRFP is the most common one to get before you go to graduate school. So this stands for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. What I didn't know about this is that you can definitely apply your senior year before you go to graduate school. You don't have to have gotten into a graduate program. You do not have to have a PI already picked out. You can apply as late as the second year of your PhD, but they're significantly harsher on first and second year PhD students than they are on undergraduates, because they're expected to have more and to have produced things already, and yada yada yada. I spelled entrepreneur wrong. So you can apply senior year. I recommend finding a PI. I recommend likely your research PI. I recommend finding people that have already applied for it, seeing what their applications are like, and then writing one for any project you're interested in. It is totally okay if that project is then not what you end up doing for your PhD. They understand that that's not exactly a 1-to-1 ratio, especially because you haven't gotten into a program yet, but it looks really good, and it's a really good practice to apply. If you are a non-US citizen, you are not eligible for that one, but there is a nice list. I'll write out the link here from the University of Connecticut that has a poor, I spelled it wrong. You know what? I'm gonna copy and paste from the notes I'm reading off of. Opportunities for non-US citizens. And so there are fellowship opportunities for you as well. And also look into your home country and see if there are fellowship opportunities for you to go internationally or within your home country, or your country of nationality, of citizenship, to find fellowships there as well. And then finally, publications. I would say this really comes down to luck. You can be a really excellent undergraduate, but the project that you're working on just isn't at the point of publishing, and maybe you'll never get a publication. I never had any out of my undergraduate. I did fine. Or you can be really lucky and you can get onto a project that's about to finish and you're an author. You can be unlucky and the lab doesn't give authorship to undergrads very often, or you can be really lucky and not the lab or the field that you're in is the type that gives a lot of authors. It's really great to get on a publication, but I wouldn't make this the number one aim of undergraduate. You can get into a fantastic graduate program without that. Overall, I would say explore things that you're interested in. I had no idea I would study neuroscience. I had no idea I would end up in Seattle. I went where people said that there was a healthy environment, and I applied there as well, and it happened to work out pretty well for me. Don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to be perfect. That doesn't exist. I think it's much more interesting to be you and unique and what you are interested in, and then to apply and really show that you're you and show what you're bringing to this program and show how you bring in a unique perspective, and then try to have fun with it. This is supposedly the thing that you want to do with your life, so you should be able to live and to thrive while you're doing it. Okay, thanks everybody. How do I end it?